This week on your Old School RuneScape update, July's official client update brings news on HD mode, the plugins API, and deprecating the Java client. We then head west for Kingdom Divided. From Kourend lore, boss fights, and scheming, we discuss the future of Kourend. This is the Old School RuneScape update, episode 38, recorded Saturday, July 27th, 2024. Clients and Kourend. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Old School RuneScape update. Sirion and myself are in as we are each and every week. Bit of a quieter week generally here on Old School this week, so we decided to head back west to Zaya and to cap off our Kourend adventure this week.
Yeah, this has been a long time.
A long time coming.
Yeah,
and we have been saving this quest for a quiet week like this, and you might say that's a bit intentional, but of course we'll get into that a little bit later on the podcast. In the meantime, full show notes, update.show/OS. We also have a friends chatting game at BitsBytes and Discord at update.show/Discord. And the last quick reminder this week, I know that's like the fourth thing I'm reminding you guys about, but if you do want to take our survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Update.show/survey. It'll help tell us what you think of what we're doing with the Old School RuneScape update and where the show can go in the future. So once again, update.show/survey. It'll take you about 2 minutes to take, and we greatly appreciate your input. So we should start with the news of the week. And you know what I think isn't in the show notes, but I just want to mention briefly as news of the week. Everything passed on the minigames poll, except one question. Question 17. Should the nail beast attack sounds be made quieter? That one did not pass. 59.8% voted yes. 40.2% no.
Yeah. To me, it felt like a weird vote to begin with. It's like, just do it. And now people, I don't know. You never know for sure, but I feel this is one that people will sort of meme vote on just so that it stays that way.
Yeah,
because it is a bit of a silly complaint.
It is, and I mean, maybe it's seen as an accessibility thing. I don't know. I don't like temple trekking. I did it once for comp back on RS3, and I don't plan on going back if I can avoid it. So I just wanted to highlight that there as that. But we did also get some news this week regarding the incoming official client update, which Jagex continues to work on, and this update follows what we saw at the Winter Summit this year, where they announced that there would be HD mode and the client plugin API. And what are you thinking at this? Because I mean, we got another update on HD and SD mode, and I feel like that's to be expected, and people are generally okay with that. But I feel like the devil that's in the details here is the API, right?
Yeah, it's in general. I think it's not a bad thing to move this like in-house, like we talked about this before, and I think they do a good job of explaining it, right? I am actually really excited about the prospect of getting menu entry swapper on my mobile version of RuneScape, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna be fantastic. That's one of the most useful plugins I use right now, I think. So definitely think
that's becoming a main feature, which I mean
exactly.
Is
so I definitely think I like that they're adding plugins. My worry is not so much that we're not getting any plugins on the official client. I think the most important plugins will indeed be ported. I worry about like all of the niche plugins that you have right now. Like there's hundreds upon hundreds of Runelight plugins, and it's like, oh, I go and do temporos. Let's see if there's a plugin for that. And like I feel like every niche little thing that you can do in old school, it has like a plugin that makes that a slightly less painful.
Yeah.
And the chance that all plugins will indeed be updated and ported is, I don't consider that huge. And
No, I have to
that's
say
what
there's a
worries
very
me.
slim chance that will happen. Like you said, your big ones like Quest Helper and all those other ones associated around that are huge are going to make their way over, because Jagex is going to, reach out to the plugin developers that have the most people behind them. But the question is, will the plugin API, which for people unaware, an API is an application programming interface, and what that does is it allows a programmer to interact with the third-party piece of software, and the question is, will that provide a one-to-one or very close to one-to-one translation into what people have become used to with Runelight plugins? And if the answer to that is no, then we're getting to the situation that you have just outlined, where you might have your small oddball plugins for something like Temporos or Guardians of the Rift that don't work, and that's the devil in the
biggest. And then you get like this ecosystem problem. It's the same as like app stores, right? Like, why would you install a new app store on your phone?
Yeah.
If it doesn't have the apps you want, but why would an app developer put effort in releasing an app on an app store if there's no users, right? Like it's a chicken and the egg problem, and the official client will run into a chicken or the egg problem in that you need to get users there first. And in that respect, I think the biggest asset that Jagex has is mobile, because people don't have a choice there. So the fact that there is already a bunch of users on their mobile apps will definitely help in getting some of the plugins on there. And it's just hoping that will provide enough critical mass to get all of the plugin developers across. And
because that's a huge audience. You remember how the old school player charge shot up when mobile released?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, we'll see. I think the biggest so that's these plugins, right? They're the carrot for moving towards a new client, right? There's like, hey, look at it. And if the API is well designed, and maybe even better designed than a Runelight API, like it maybe even allows more features because, then the plugins might be high quality, might be better. That might convince people to switch over. But there's also the stick that might convince people to move over, which is the deprecation of the Java client, right?
Yeah.
That's something that was announced.
Which needs to happen, if I'm being honest, eventually. Because people don't realize this. You can still get the old Java client if you want to for OS. Runelight is Java-based, but it's hidden away behind the Runelight wrapper, thankfully, for us.
Yeah, and that would be my worry. When I read that, right, the first thought I had in my mind is, oh, if we are deprecating the Java client, I'm assuming
that means Runelight,
given that it's a wrapper around it, it will sort of lose the patches because it can't ingest the Java client anymore, right? Because it's not built around the C++ client. So my question about, what does it mean to deprecate a Java client if HDOS and Runelight continue to be supported? Because, it's just a Java, you still need to support all the features in the Java client. So it wouldn't surprise me if they get deprecated eventually as well. But, that, just like how it's taking time for the community to adopt Jagex accounts, I think it's going to take time for the community to move over to the official client, because, it only takes one or two plugins that any person considers critical to the way they play the game, and that might be a different plugin for every user. Like, so there might be hundreds of plugins that have that role for at least a group of people, until that's migrated, people are going to be like, this degrades my gameplay experience.
Or even
So
something, as simple as highlighting agility obstacles and agility shortcuts, something like that.
yeah, I think that's in the official client though.
Okay. But they say soon you'll need to play via the official client, RuneLite, or HDOS. So does this not mean that if they deprecate the Java client, that RuneLite will go away?
No, I guess they will continue supporting it. I don't know how. It might be. I think the main reason is that the RuneLite client does support Jagex accounts. I think that is probably the main reason that they're okay with it continue existing.
Okay.
And like, if you think about it, that functionality, because it's not in a Java client, must be something that is built by the RuneLite team. So the RuneLite team is actively developing and maintaining the client.
Yeah, like keep in mind the official client can't, the legacy Java client rather can't go beyond 50 FPS, but RuneLite can do that no problem. So
exactly. So my guess is that the RuneLite client is just in a better state technology-wise. I don't know if it wraps the official Java client or if it wrote its own client.
Because if I remember how this works with Java in general, is that you can't really import somebody else's Java objects and expect to have a full understanding of them.
Oh, we're gonna
right?
talk about what my job is. Yes, you can, but you can. There are mechanisms for that.
Okay.
But
so there are mechanisms for that now.
Oh, absolutely, there are.
Okay.
That's yeah. That's my entire job summarized, basically.
There you go, folks. There you go. Okay, so you're saying it's no big deal then anymore.
I don't know. I don't know enough about the technology in RuneLite to know what solution they decided to choose.
Okay. Now, another interesting bit associated with this is the push to Jagex accounts here. And another thing that they said they're looking at doing with this is making it easier to swap between RS accounts in the mobile client, which, you kind of need to do because you need to hit the log out, then you need to go through the entire web process to choose a new character with that. So when that arrives, that'll be good. And, I know there's a lot of people out there who are skeptical about Jagex accounts, but to just put this in the sense of security and making sure that nobody, guesses your password, because I know there's lots of people out there who, when it comes to passwords, feel they have strong passwords. The old non-Jagex account system for passwords in this game only supports letters and numbers and no upper and lower case. Whereas the new Jagex account system supports uppercase, lowercase, symbols, what have you. And how do I know this? Well, once before Jagex accounts, my passwords had upper and lowercase characters in it, and it got to a point where once I just decided for the hell of it, I'll type my password in without, pressing shift where I normally press shift, and it just worked. So there's no uppercase and special character support in the old system. So that and modern two-factor authentication, amongst other things, is a prime reason to upgrade to Jagex accounts if you have not already. And after you do that, it's quite seamless and it's not that painful. So that's just my push out there for anybody to upgrade to a Jagex account who hasn't. And if you go to the news post here, at the very bottom of it, they got an 8-step guide about how to do that, and that's a little bit longer than I'd like it to take to tell somebody about how to move to a Jagex account, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, but like it's honestly, it's a very painless process, and you get led to it in a really smooth way. It's a good user experience.
Yeah, so. It is. But overall, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the new client, and I think the thing I'm most looking forward to with this is the HD mode, because I like kind of what the HD mode of 117 looks like. It's just I don't like what it does to my computer, so I'm hoping that their HD mode will run a little bit better than 117 does. So that's the official client update for July. And they did say they will be showing more off at the Summer Summit when that happens, which by the the days we're looking at here, that's going to be either August or early September at this point. So we'll put a bookmark in the calendar for that one when it happens. So
yeah, looking forward to that.
Indeed. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we also headed back out west and did A Kingdom Divided this week. And, it was interesting sitting here, and I was talking about clients in the show notes when I was building them, and then for the longest time in the show notes, I put we're talking about Client of Kourend this week on the show.
Yeah.
No, that's where we started off. And, for what it's worth, this, I think, was maybe one of the earliest quests that we did to unlock when we started old school, because I remember doing this when I was, like level 20, unlocking Kourend just for the utility that it offered. Yep. And, starting to work the way through the reputation system, which I'm glad is gone, by the way. I'm glad I didn't have to go through 100 on each of those, waited to do the quest until after this. But I feel the best way to summarize A Kingdom Divided is the traditional MMO story of plotting and scheming behind the scenes, and then at the end you realize that there's a bigger picture happening that also, in doing so, manages to keep itself grounded. And, of course, spoilers ahead for people who haven't done it. We're going to do this as we do for quest weeks. I know this is an old quest, but I'm just going to say that anyways. So what would you say, where do you want to start with this? You want to start with a bit of a lore overview? You want to give your thoughts on it? Where do you want to begin?
I think the lore can be summarized pretty, quickly. I think, the idea of the storyline, I think, is that we're talking about Kourend, which is, strictly speaking, a kingdom, but there's no longer a king. So it's ruled by a council,
and through some of the a corrupt council.
Yes, a corrupt council, and through some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Prequel quests from the different houses. You learn a little bit about the history of how the council came to be through in Depths of Despair, you learn about the Royal Accord, and during the Piscavilius quest, Queen of Thieves, you learn about the corruptness of the council. So, all of the quests sort of put little puzzle pieces in place, and then A Kingdom Divided sort of takes that and puts them all together into a single story.
Yeah.
Which I think they did really well.
It was well done.
It didn't feel like none of it was a stretch. They didn't pull in Deus Ex Machinas, and I don't know how much of it was planned ahead of time. But I didn't in some storylines in RuneScape, you get this thing where midway through the direction of the quest line sort of changes because it's a different mod working on it. But
yeah,
all of these quests, they feel consistent.
Yeah, that's the good way of putting it. And, we were 2 minutes into the quest, I'm like, this is a mod ed quest, isn't it? Just in terms of, how the characters were talking and what the general sensation of it was. And lo and behold, yes, mod ed, who I feel like, is probably, I think, in terms of old school lore, has made a name for himself, just in terms of everything that he has done to, in effect, enhance what is the lore of old school. Because I say that because the game came in 2013, and for so long there was no, old school native quest to it. And then bam, we have, amongst other things, the Kourend series, and now we're seeing the same thing with the Varlamar series. And it's like, wow, this is telling a story of how you would expect a modern MMO to tell a story with this game that was copied from a 2007 save. And it's doing it in an amazing way, to the point where it's not only believable, but you're taking sides with these characters, and it feels as though something is amok from the very beginning. I want to say I remember specifically, like you said, when we were doing Queen of Thieves way back in the day. So, I just actually looked up the release dates right now for this. So, Client of Kourend came out in April 2017, and the first two subquests came out in November 2017. The latter two in January 2019, and then Kingdom Divided in June 2021, with Tale of the Righteous in 2018, and X Marks the Spot being added after the fact as the Kourend introduction. So, it was done in about two years and a bit, is how long it took them to go from the beginning of this to, or 4 years and a bit rather. So
okay, I mean that's not long, that's not short, so
no. And from the looks of it, they were also all different developers too. So Mod Wolf did some, Ed did some, but overall, lore-wise on this, you did this on Leagues, and you have the benefit of doing it a second time. Did you pay attention to the story when you did it on Leagues, or did you just spacebar it?
I purposefully spacebarred through the quest, and I used Quest Helper to basically try and skip as much of it as possible. But I mean, obviously, I knew what was coming. It's hard to miss in the cutscenes, in a sense.
Yeah,
so I tried shutting my mouth as much as possible and let you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that, but maybe it helped a bit at the end. So, talking about things in that regard, we find that they've kept Rose's body alive for all these years in this quest, because she was supposed to inevitably inherit the kingdom, and they in effect poisoned the king leading up before that. And that's the level of corruption that we're exposing in this one. And I don't think RuneScape has done anything quite to that level before in terms of palace intrigue, have they?
No, I don't think so. Like, I mean, the elf quests have some of that, of course.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Like the plague.
Like, exactly, around the plague. But other than that, the human kingdoms are typically portrayed fairly stable. So, yeah, it's definitely... It definitely feels unique within the game, but not out of place. And this is way more realistic, right? Like, if you if you look at the history, the natural state is actually not peace.
Yeah.
Like, peace requires individuals, or at least institutions, to actively maintain it.
Correct.
Which is right now what we have the United Nations trying, I guess, sort of. But like, if you look at the historically, there's always strife, because there's always ambition, there's always limited resources. So in a sense, the world as presented in RuneScape, like in Gilenoy, is very unrealistic, because realistically you would expect the kingdoms of Mistalin and Asgarnia and Kandarin to be at continuous strife, and yet you almost sort of see them being like buds all the time.
Yeah,
which is,
and if
that's
anything,
not how history works.
If anything, the agitators are things like Majorat, or things coming from under the ground, or weird,
and
almost deity-like things.
And it doesn't mean that there's continuous active war and active fighting, but at the very least, they're sort of constant competition. So in that respect, I think Great Kourend is a very realistic depiction of how something like this would actually go.
And this is the
Right?
epitome, yeah, this is the epitome of grounded storytelling in that regard because, yeah, this is RuneScape and it's got the RuneScape touches to it, right? But you could put this in any other game, the general sense of it, and you could tell that story. It wouldn't be the same, but you could do it.
I was like doing certain parts of it. Like I think the meeting with all the leaders at the end. I was like, I could totally see this being played out in a movie, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the plot of A Kingdom Divided is good enough that if you did, I mean, you might need to do some additional world building, but you could make a movie out of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that cannot be said for many quests.
No. No, I'm trying to think, RS old school and RS3 wise, if there's anything else that comes remotely close to that. Maybe the singing quest in Al Kharid that I'm forgetting the name of.
Yeah, but that was okay, yes, but that was purposely built that way, I think. Which is why you have the Alexa.
Yeah, the Alexa virtual quest on that.
Exactly. So yeah, you're right. That also
Why am I
works.
forgetting the name of that quest? That's not good.
Um,
Oh no.
One piercing note.
One piercing note. There you go. What about Broken Home as a horror movie?
Oh, please no. No, but like, no. But like, it's. I mean, we can have a long discussion about Broken Home, whether it's good or bad, and I think it's actually
Not for this show.
It's pretty a decent attempt, but I don't think the plot itself is unique or interesting enough to make a movie out of it and make it stand on its own.
Right. And see, maybe I was going the opposite way on this because I was thinking, I could totally see this quest playing out in ESO amongst the various, alliances there too. So, Elder Scrolls Online as an option. So maybe that's just to the general nature of it and why it feels so easy to adapt to the movie sense, perhaps. And it does tell the good story about corruption and inevitably starting as something local. And, by the end of it, the question is, well, what the heck is going on here? Is it the weird people in Varlamore causing this? Is it something else? And that's kind of the cliffhanger we're left on. I want to talk a bit about the plotting and scheming, but before we get there, I want to talk about the Zamfir boss fight. I ran out of food the first attempt because I didn't fully understand the hand mechanic, but then after I understood the hand mechanic, it was actually quite intuitive and straightforward, this boss fight here. And I do have to say, what they did with this, I think, is an example of how quest boss fights should be. Because you have one, mechanic, and that's either the hands coming from the ceiling or the hands that spawn, right? Now, the ones that spawn, you kill them. They have 15 life points each. Not too bad. But for the ones that come from the ceiling, at first I didn't know what was going on with that, and that's, what did me in the first run. But then I talked to you again about it, and I listened and watched the screen more closely, and then not only do you see the noises of the hands dropping, but you also get an audio cue before it happens. And the best thing to, of course, do with that is just to, run back and forth until the hand stops with that. So I feel that it was a good boss fight, not only, because it fit into the quest, but because they also did, to the best of their abilities, I believe, a certain amount of telegraphing of the mechanics in terms of the audio cues and just what was going to be happening with that. So even though it was a bit rough at start, it was good.
Yeah, I think it did a good mix of, introducing some mechanics to make it not just, a bag of hit points. I mean, same with the Judge of Yamo boss fight, right? Like, there's a few mechanics in there.
Yeah.
Is it Yamo?
Yeah, I know.
Did I say it wrong?
No. I just felt like that one was the bag of HP, that's all.
Yeah, but they introduced some mechanic. I mean, it's a mid-fight boss, right? But
I mean, unless you
mid-quest
lag and
boss.
you click all over the firewalls with your client and you kill yourself that way like I did.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are high combat level for that, so that
Fair
plays
enough.
into it. But like, I don't think quest bosses have to be super complex and hard as long as they have something interesting about them, and I think they did a right balance for this quest.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summarizing it.
It's
when
very approachable.
And then the other combat was just when the assassins appear, you have to kill them, which I think happened like 3 or 4 times, right? And that was pretty much
It happens
combat.
twice, and the third time, well,
What?
oh, the assassin succeeded before we could kill him.
Right. Right, at the very end. We'll get there. And that, I think, leads into the plotting and scheming of this. And you said that I absolutely was going to like this quest for this reason, because the entire business of getting the houses together involves, of course, doing some form of favor, making it so that they have something to gain out of it at the end. And at the end of it, it really comes down to the fact that after the whole Rose revelation that we talked about, there's really only 2 candidates for the new king of Kourend, because of course, Arceus can't have it, Piscarilius doesn't want it, Lova King doesn't want it, but it comes down to Lord Hosidius and Lord Shazin.
Mm-hmm.
And Shazin decides that he shouldn't have it, which I found surprising at the end, that he admitted that.
I mean, my guess is, and that's sort of from the subtext, is you get this whole thing, like the Shasian quest is all about the history with Xeric, which, you know, that caused problems. It's like the Age of Strife. I don't know. There's like a name for it. And it turns out that Xeric is King Shasian the 17th or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And what we find is we go, and like 2 of the subquests are sort of related to this. We end up finding the diary that reveals more information about this. So my guess is that Lord Hosidius went up to Lord Shasian and like, hey, here's proof that that Xeric was a Shasian. Do you really want to have a Shasian as a king as well? Do you think the people will accept that if this information comes out? So I think there's a little bit of bribery going on there, in a sense.
Which is standard for the political scene, let's be honest here, in terms of how this...
that's how that goes, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's very much like, hey, look, I have dirt on you. I think you should reconsider, running for president, running for king, rather. So that's sort of what was going on there. It wasn't made very clear, but thank God it wasn't made clear, because I feel modern day storytelling is all about, screw subtext. We're just going to tell you every single detail because we don't trust you to figure it out yourself.
Or you want to,
and here,
be there for 5 minutes and then just get on to the next thing.
Exactly. And here I felt that they left things a little bit more open. The quest didn't need... It felt like a good conclusion. I think you can agree with that.
Yeah.
And yet it did not go out of its way to neatly tidy up every single
no, it didn't.
Story thread.
It didn't, because it's very clear, like I said, that despite all the plotting and, whatnot going around here, we do get something satisfying that comes from that for people who like that kind of adventure, who like that kind of, quest episode. But at the end, it's very clear that something is still wrong, and it's kind of left off to the lurch to see, is it the people of Varlamore? Is it some other dark influence happening? And of course, like you said, the thing you were alluding to where they were successful is that this quest ends with the king that was just instilled being killed again by an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, where do we go next with this? So
I think it's interesting because, and that was a really beautiful bit of storytelling, right? Like, there's all the reason in the world to suspect that the assassins come from the council.
yeah, I was thinking,
And then the council is disposed of, the king is set there, and like, for me, it was a really good plot twist. I really enjoyed it.
Like, and another person might say Varlamore, but I think given what we've learned about Varlamore recently, I don't think that's the answer.
No, probably not.
And that goes to what you were saying as we were finishing up this quest, is that the Varlamore line is going to culminate in a similar, master level quest. Or what was this? Was this master or experienced?
Yeah, master.
No, it was experienced.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, this was experienced.
Okay. Yeah, that
Not
makes
master.
sense. That's why the combat was relatively straightforward, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's safe to say that the Varlamore series will conclude in something like this, and then the two will meet up for, a grand Western Lands finale, so to speak, on something to this regard that deals with whatever dark force is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the dark force is? It's got to be the remnants, I think, of the Zamper thing, right? Or something similar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, we're gonna learn what Veos is all about. I mean, he's been sketchy since the beginning.
Yeah, because he just disappears, and we see that he's involved with Zamfer, but we really don't get a conclusion on his storyline here.
No, I wonder if his client, Veos' client, is Xeric himself.
That would be interesting.
But it being something different would definitely what's the term I'm looking for? Go against expectations. That would be an interesting surprise. So...
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because that aspect is first, of course, introduced in the client of Kourend, right?
Yep.
And that quest was the first one that was put down back in 2017 with this. And
I love, because that to me, this is how you do big mysterious threats right. Like, from the get-go, there's something wrong with this continent. Like, the very first quest we do, Client of Kourend, something weird is happening here. And especially then the Ascent of Arceus, like, weird stuff happens, and we learn about the history, and like, all of the little pieces just, they all don't add up.
No.
And
I think they still don't.
And they still don't. But they do a really good job at working towards a point where it all seems to add up, and then they pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah, like initially you would think that it was the council, but it's not.
Exactly. And they do it in a way where you don't feel that the character you're playing is just dumb. Because that's how a lot of these quests go, right?
Yes, I was just going to say that. Your character gets made the fool.
Exactly. It's just being a fool, and you as a player are just sitting there like, come on.
Like, even in the elf quest line, like, the fact that you, in effect, lower the defenses for that, and they're like, why would you do that? That's, again, your player being misled and being made the fool.
Yeah, exactly. And here, that is totally not the case. And I love the break with that trope.
And in many ways, I feel like that was the design of the player character for so long in the entirety of RuneScape. And it's nice to see at least the OS team breaking away from that with some of their native content here. Which is an important thing to underscore, that you can indeed do that. So.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I can't wait for the Valamore stuff to, be released so that we have more reasons to sort of merge those storylines and get to the bottom of all of this. Because this is perhaps maybe my most favorite storyline right now in Old School.
In Old School, sure, I'll give you that. In all of RS, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that and see where that lands in terms of the entire RuneScape universe for me.
Yeah. No, it's because it is simultaneously so grounded and has this bigger thread, like it none of it is overbearing. It's all realistic and, like just your suspense of disbelief doesn't have to be all the way out there. Like it all kinda adds up. And then it doesn't. And that's just good storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summarizing it. If you had to just, put $1 down, where would you say we go with this next? I mean, obviously tying the two together is going to happen probably at some point, but
I mean, I'm definitely hoping for a Grandmaster.
Mm-hmm.
But if this is the only experience, there's maybe room for a Master Quest before that. I mean, the more the better, to be honest. I would love for this to be fleshed out more. Where do we go next? I mean, it's almost a given that we will get some kind of quest that wraps up the storyline around Xeric and Xamthor, because Xamthor is not dead. So.
No.
I think there will be a rematch at some point. It wouldn't surprise me if we get like a rematch in the Master sequel, and then we find out who his master is, and then we go into like the final quest as a Grandmaster. But we'll see.
How do you think the Varlamore folks will come into this?
Hard to say.
Because we don't know too much about them, really. We just really learned a bit about how they run their kingdom and whatnot, and how it's different than everything else.
They also are dealing with a threat, of course, and
Mm-hmm.
I think their bad relations started with some of the consequences from the Xeric era. So
what if it's the same bad actor?
That's definitely something that I could see happening.
And that would be a good way, again, to bring the two kingdoms together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And to tell that story as, say, hey, and I feel like if this were to happen in the future, I could say to somebody who, is just wanting to get into Old School, I could say, level up your stats a bit, and as soon as you can, head into Kourend and work to that as your first quest line that you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
kind of angle towards if you want the true Old School questing experience is what I'd say probably with that. Of course, if all goes to garbage after that, then I'll famously eat my words. But
yeah, so I'm just quickly looking it up. So yeah, Xeric is King Shashin the Seventh. It's suggested at least. And then it is okay. So King Shashin the Seventh died, but it is thought that Xeric is basically the resurrected form of him, using a similar magic that the Arceus are using to be immortal.
Okay, that gets interesting.
So then he lived with the lizard men. Then were his followers.
That's neat.
Okay, yes, the Age of Strife. Okay, he basically led an expedition, into like the Cabus Lowlands.
Sure.
And the people that fled from Great Kourend during this great expedition founded the Kingdom of Valamore.
Which makes sense geographically, too, when you think about it.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you extend that out further, that might also tell us why you got some of the weird customs, or at least perceived weird customs that they have in Varlamore, like
Yeah.
remembering how absurd it was that we saw that execution happen, right? So
Yeah. Oh, and the kingdom of Kourend was also founded based on refugees, but in the other direction, basically. So.
well, there you go. Okay. So it makes sense for them to come together again at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Brief update time for what we've been doing on RS before we leave for the week. What have you been doing aside from this quest?
Honestly, this like my motivation ebbs and flows. So this week was a slow week. I did finish the easy desert tasks. I also finished all of the medium and hard tasks that I could.
Good.
Just a few quest locked tasks left. As well as killing the Calphite Queen, which I need to go and just do once, just like killing Zora once.
Yeah, that never used to be like that. Used to be a big boss, the Calphite Queen, and I feel like at this point, we're at the level where we could probably reasonably solo that, right?
Yes, you can, but you do need to bring 2 styles, and you do need to deal with all of that. So yeah,
right.
We'll see. But that's been me. That's gonna be the next week. I've also been doing some fishing AFK, to be honest.
Oh, that's good. That's a good thing to be doing.
It turns out that like the AFK rates at barbarian fishing, I mean, they're slower than Temporos, but not much slower than Temporos. So,
and
given the fact that I can just
a bit better
do it during work time,
yeah,
it means that that's probably going to be the way to go as well.
Yeah, and when you look at just general AFK things as well, I have the desire to get 80 combat all styles before we do any more Grandmaster quests. I think that's what Song of the Elves and Gothic Sleeps taught me. With that, so that's my focus presently is just trying to do as much combat as I can, and I've moved from the crabs for the melee combat to the Nightmare Zone, and I'm averaging about 60,000 XP an hour there presently with my setup. I know there's all sorts of setups involving Darok and whatnot with 92 I think plus hit points that result in great huge amounts of XP per hour there, but quite frankly we're not there yet. And I'm not gonna lie, the grind, the combat grind is not looking good at this point from that regard, just in terms of how much needs to be done there to get to what I want to do at that. So I think that's the best that is on tap is Nightmare Zone at this rate for melee, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I did some calculations to see like if I got some expensive gear upgrades, but the differences would be marginal. So
it's just something.
I think it's just gonna come down to doing it a lot.
Yeah, and
or if you want to be more active, just do Slayer. I think you're gonna get a little bit more XP with that.
Maybe, and that might be honestly the best thing to do at this point. Just to in effect keep things diverse, because I think the other thing that one could aim for would be level 100 for pest control, because Void is still very good to get eventually, and pest control is another option you could use to just kind of spice things up a bit perhaps. So but if it was an ideal world, I would be going into my next Grandmaster quest with 85 combat stats. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll wait and see where things land combat wise, and who knows, maybe now that I'm almost 75-ish attack and I have 75 magic and 70 range, maybe Slayer won't be as bad as I remember it being back in the day. I don't know, especially with the changes we had recently. Maybe it's time to finally dive in and start doing that grind. I'm level 58 presently.
I don't think it's fun, but
Oh, I'm sorry, folks. We just had to end that on a sour note in relation to that. Hopefully things will get better in that regard. And if you do have combat suggestions for me in particular, I don't know if you want them, Sirion.
I will never say no to free advice.
Okay, well, if you have those, do let us know in the comments or in our Discord, update.show/Discord. But that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode this week. Anything else you'd like to ruminate on before we depart?
I mean, do comment. We do read them, or rather, Shane reads them and tells me about them because I'm too lazy. But we do read your comments.
Yeah, you guys had a wonderful discussion last week. I think we had like 20 comments on last week's episode, and it wasn't just back and forth with me. It was back and forth between listeners. So that was nice to see. But,
that's what we love seeing. So it does help us spread the podcast further to people who might be interested. So I don't like being that guy, but
you totally have to be. It's okay. I've been doing that for years.
Please do leave a like, subscribe, or whatever it is on your podcasting platform.
It greatly helps the channel out. And if you're joining us for the first time and you want to subscribe, update.show/OS. Click your favorite podcast platform, or if you're already on YouTube listening to this, as Sirion said, like, subscribe, bell, ding, 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 away we go. But that's pretty much it for this episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. We'll see you guys next week for another one. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.